One season, $46.5 million. The Leafs just bet the house on Matthew Nyes. Boom or bust, let's break it down. The Toronto Maple Leafs just shoved all their chips into the middle of the table. They took a look at a 22-year-old power forward with one and only one breakout season under his belt. And they didn't just bet on him. They bet the entire house. We're talking $46.5 million. It's a contract that will define this franchise for the next 6 years, for better or for worse. This isn't just a simple signing. It's a massive statement about where this team is headed. It's a roll of the dice so big that it could either kickstart a new, successful era of Maple Leafs hockey or become the very anchor that weighs the team down. The deal is done, the ink is dry, and now the entire hockey world is asking the same question. Did the Leafs just lock down a cornerstone for a future Stanley Cup, or did they make a $46.5 million mistake? One great year, that's all it took. One season of playing on the top line, and Matthew Nyes went from a promising prospect to one of the highest paid left wingers in the entire league. It's a meteoric rise, and it's backed by a huge leap of faith from a front office desperate to change the team's DNA. This contract isn't just a pat on the back for a job well done. It's a projection, a hope, and a massive gamble that the player we saw last year is the real deal and is only just getting started. But in a league with a hard salary cap, bets this big can define a GM's legacy and a franchise's fate. So today, we're breaking it all down. The player, the contract, the immense risk, and even the greater potential reward. To get the size of this bet, you have to understand the player at the center of it all. Matthew Nyes, a second-round pick from the 2021 draft, wasn't always seen as a future financial heavyweight. In his first full season in 2023-24, he was a solid but not spectacular secondary player, putting up a respectable 15 goals and 35 points. He showed flashes of what he could become, big, physical, and with a talent for getting to the tough areas. But he was a complementary piece, not the one driving the offense. Then, the 2024-25 season happened. Everything changed. Stapled to the top line with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, Nyes didn't just get better, he exploded. In 78 games, he put up a career-best 29 goals and 29 assists for 58 points. He more than doubled his goal scoring, became a regular on the top power play unit, and even started killing penalties. He wasn't just tagging along with two superstars, he was an active, crucial part of one of the league's most dangerous lines. His physical game became his calling card. At 6'3" and 227 pounds, Nyes plays a true power forwards game, a style Toronto has been missing for years. He threw his body around, winning puck battles in the corners, and then had the skill to finish plays in front of the net. He proved this with his first ever NHL hat-trick against the Boston Bruins, a game where he put his entire toolkit on display and announced his arrival as a top-tier offensive threat. This level of play carries straight into the playoffs, where he notched 7 points in 13 games, showing he could keep it up when the games mattered most. By the end of the season, Nyes had gone from a promising kid to what looked like an essential piece of the Leafs core. The question was no longer if he was good, but just how good, and what was that worth? On July 1st, 2025, we got our answer. The Maple Leafs signed Matthew Nyes to a 6-year, $46.5 million contract extension that comes with an average annual value, or cap hit, of $7.75 million per season. This deal was signed just as Nyes was about to become a restricted free agent, a clear move to prevent a hostile offer sheet from another team, a tactic that could have pushed the price even higher or backed the Leafs into a corner. Let's put that $7.75 million number in perspective. It immediately launches Nyes into the top tier of salaried wingers, making him one of the highest paid at his position in the NHL. He's now making more than established players on other teams and is right in the mix with some of the league's most prominent young stars. The most obvious comparison for this contract is Montreal's Cole Caulfield. Just 2 years ago, Caulfield signed an 8-year deal with a cap hit of $7.85 million. When he signed, Caulfield was coming off a season where he had scored 26 goals in only 46 games, a ridiculous 46-goal pace over a full season. Nyes' production wasn't quite at that elite goal-scoring level. Still, his all-around game, physicality, and his role on a contending team were clearly valued at a similar level by Toronto's front office. Other experts have pointed to players like Matt Boldy of the Minnesota Wild, who signed a 7-year, $7 million average annual value deal after a 63-point season as another benchmark. While some analytics suggested Nyes' value was probably closer to the $7 to $7.5 million range, the Leafs paid a little extra. They spent it to lock him up for 6 years, buying out all of his restricted free agency years and 1 year of unrestricted free agency, securing him through what should be his prime. The structure of the deal is also heavily front-loaded with signing bonuses, with Nyes set to make a cool $9 million in cash in the first year alone. This is a serious financial commitment and a clear sign that the team sees him as a long-term solution, not a one-season wonder. And that brings us to the heart of it all, the gamble itself. Is this a wise investment in a rising star, or is it a classic case of paying for potential that might not fully pan out? First, let's look at the argument for this being a brilliant move, the reward. The Leafs have locked up a 22-year-old 6'3" power forward who has already shown he can score nearly 30 goals while playing a physical, dominant game. Players with that mix of size, skill, and grit are infrequent and extremely valuable in the playoffs. If Nyes keeps developing on his current path, that $7.75 million cap hit could look like an absolute steal in a couple of years. If he turns into a consistent 35-goal, 70-point power forward, this contract will be praised as a genius move. Plus, getting this deal done gives the team cost certainty. The front office knows exactly what one of its key offensive players will cost for the next 6 seasons, which is vital for long-term planning with a rising salary cap. It also dodged the very real threat of an offer sheet, which rival GMs were almost certainly thinking about. If a team with cap space had signed Nyes to an offer sheet over, say, $8.5 million, the Leafs would have had to either match it and overpay or walk away and lose him for just draft picks. By acting first, they stayed in control. Now, for the risk, and it's a big one. The main worry is the sample size. The Leafs are paying Nyes based on a single season of elite production, while he played with 2 of the most gifted offensive players in the world, Matthews and Marner. Was his breakout a true sign of his own talent, or was he just in an extraordinary situation? What happens if he can't put up those numbers without an elite playmaker like Marner next to him? What if his last season was his peak, not his starting point? If his production flatlines, or, even worse, drops back to what you'd expect from a 40-point secondary scorer, this contract goes from a potential bargain to an absolute anchor. A $7.75 million cap hit for a middle six winger is the kind of deal that cripples a team's flexibility, making it impossible to afford depth or fix other problems. NHL history is full of players who got huge contracts after one great year, only to fade back to being just average. The Leafs are betting everything that Matthew Nyes isn't one of them. It's a calculated risk based on his age, his tools, and his work ethic, but it's still a risk. This is one of the most polarizing contracts the Leafs have handed out in years. Some see it as a wise, necessary investment in the team's future, while others see a reckless overpayment based on minimal proof. So, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Is this $46.5 million contract for Matthew Nyes a win or a disaster for the Toronto Maple Leafs? And while you're at it, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the biggest stories in hockey. You can't look at this contract in a vacuum. The signing of Matthew Nyes is directly tied to the uncertain future of another star winger in Toronto, Mitch Marner. For months, reports have suggested that contract talks between Marner and the Leafs have gone nowhere, with Marner heading toward unrestricted free agency. With the sign and trade sending him to Vegas now complete, the writing on the wall has become official. This context is everything. Committing $7.75 million a year to Nyes feels like a strategic pivot, a relocation of money. By locking up a younger, more physical top-line winger, the Leafs are essentially buying insurance for Marner's departure. They're making sure Austin Matthews still has a high-end, familiar winger to play with, softening the offensive blow that losing a 100-point player would inevitably cause. General Manager Brad Treliving has talked about needing to change the team's DNA after so many playoff flameouts. This contract is the first big move that puts that idea into practice. It prioritizes size and physicality in a top-6 role, signaling a move away from the smaller, skill-first model that has defined the team for nearly a decade. In short, the Leafs decided they couldn't afford to keep Marner at his likely price and instead invested a big chunk of those potential savings into a player who brings something different to the table. This makes the Nyes gamble even more interesting. He isn't just getting paid to be a good player. He's being paid to help fill the gigantic void left by a franchise icon. The pressure on him to not only live up to his deal, but to also carry a heavier offensive load in a post-Marner world is immense. This signing doesn't just change the salary cap, it redefines the offensive hierarchy and the very identity of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So, where does that leave us? The Toronto Maple Leafs have made a massive franchise-altering bet on Matthew Nyes. They're betting that his breakout 2024-25 season wasn't a fluke, but the start of a long, dominant career as a premier NHL power forward. They're betting that his size, his work ethic, and his clutch scoring are the missing ingredients they've been searching for. If they're right, this 6-year, $46.5 million deal will be remembered as the moment the Leafs started building a tougher, more playoff-ready roster. Nyes will become a cornerstone, a fan favorite, and a key piece of the puzzle that finally brings the championship back to Toronto. But if they're wrong, if his line mates inflated his production, if he can't handle the pressure of this new contract, if he becomes just another good player making great player money, this deal will be pointed to for years as a huge misstep. It'll be another chapter in the long story of the Leafs salary cap problems, a warning about paying for potential that never quite arrived. There's no middle ground here. This is a boom or bust contract. It's a high-stakes gamble that will define this team's chances for years to come. The Leafs have rolled the dice. Now, all they and their fans can do is watch to see how it all plays out. Hey, hockey fans, you can also follow my blog at https://tedtalkshockey.com, and remember to keep your stick on the ice. Thanks for watching.